There it is.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. And thank you for the introduction. As mentioned, I lead the internal audit function for Arlo Technologies, and my background has been mostly in finance and accounting. While I do spend a lot of time with our IT uh, folks across the company and doing a lot of work in that area. My background is mainly in accounting and finance, so I have an interesting perspective on how AI can help, particularly with SOC reports. So, as an auditor, and for those of you who work for public companies or working with compliance works, compliance folk or internal auditors, you're going to be asked from time to time if your service providers provide any SOC reports and what the control environment might be like. And a lot of time, if you only interact with auditors once a year or maybe 3 or 4 times a year, you're not looking at risks the way they are, or look at the process and control environment the way they do. With the SOC reports, many organizations issue them once per year. Some do issue twice per year. So the methodologies in terms of how you review these and approach these may lapse unless it's the same person doing it every year and then they've done it for many years. So there's an opportunity here to use AI to help transform how SOC reports are reviewed and how you look at them in terms of how they might the findings with those reports might impact your organization. So what are SOC reports and what types of reports exist? So essentially, a SOC report is a report issued by an independent party, usually IT auditors, that's speaking to specific controls and processes at their service provider's organization. SOC 1 reports speak to financial reporting and type controls in that type of environment. The SOC 2 reports speak to security, as do SOC 3. There are different types of type 1 is speaking to the design of the controls and processes that the service organization has, and they're a point in time. And then type 2 reports are speaking to the operational effectiveness of those controls. So, yes, they're designed correctly, but did we execute them correctly throughout the period? And again, those periods are 6 or 12 months. Now, the reason that these reports are important is because when an organization outsources a process or part of a function, to help with the company's processes or transactions, we need to understand the risk exposure and the controls that service provider or that service provider's application is bringing to the table. And are they designed correctly? Or are they working correctly and as expected and as contractually obligated? This is something that the organization and the owners of those applications need to stay on top of, and otherwise, you can have exposure where you think something is working the way it's supposed to be, but in fact it isn't, and your external auditors or internal auditors will discover that as they review these reports, and then come to you and say, okay, this was broken at your service provider. How did you manage that risk? And you may not necessarily have an answer for them. So it's very important to review SOC reports. This is an example of some of the areas that, if you're a public company, you might be asked to provide a SOC report for one of these providers. These types of applications and services usually impact financial reporting. So for SOX compliance, you might be asked to provide a SOC report, for these types of applications. Now, they're not always available, or when you do get them, sometimes they have issues, but they are very extensive reports. On average, usually they're about 70 pages. They can be more. And they're very thorough in describing the control environment at the service provider. So you have to get into the details to really truly understand the risk of the environment at your provider, and that's where AI can come in and help. So, a little bit more on my background. Well, I do work with our IT org and also lead the audits. That's not my background, but I was able to use AI to help me understand what these SOC reports were reporting for different organizations and reconcile that to my understanding of how we're trying to manage risk. But you as application owners and really having a deeper understanding of all the capabilities and requirements of your service providers and the tools and applications they provide, you're in a better position than I am to go through these SOC reports and truly tie in all the different risks, especially as you're looking at applications integrating with each other. It really, it's an opportunity to help you elevate the way you manage risk at your organization. All right. So over the summer is when I first started taking a look at planning for review of SOC reports or auditing them that our organization uses. And I thought to myself, AI has come a long way here recently. So, can it do a decent job compared to what, experts in this area of reviewing SOC reports and auditors, what they have done, over the years. So I was pleasantly surprised. I was worried about it not being able to identify the relevant deficiencies, whether it would be able to tell me, this is something you should be concerned with versus maybe something that's more of a minor issue and why. And then also just outside of SOX, if I wanted to understand from an operational perspective, if there were any issues that I should be worried about, I wasn't sure if it'd be able to do that or give me recommendations on how to address the risk. And I was very pleasantly surprised and very, very quickly did identify what a human would, and then also was able to make recommendations on how to address the risks. I looked at different dependencies and it even provided me when prompted for an executive summary. So my first experiment where I wasn't sure if it was going to be able to do the work that historically professionals have done, it did a decent job. Now, the when I took the next step and said, okay, and now I really want to understand, if you compare the requirements in a SOC report from the actual organization, because all service providers will say, hey, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, but this only works if you do these other 30 things or 60 things. You have to have these controls at your organization. So in order to have the model better understand our organization and our needs, I provided examples of controls, of policies, of our risk assessment methodology, and then also examples of historical findings that I've come across in the past uh, to see if AI would be able to incorporate that information into its analysis. And it very quickly was able to map our control environment or the control environment I fed it to the the SOC report and then highlight where the risks might be based on what the SOC report was stating would be needed from our organization. As very quickly it was able to analyze whether how strongly policies are being addressed, and then in terms of scoring, I was able to give it some parameters and thresholds, and it gave me its output on what might be different level scoring across the different areas in the report. So it was once I fed it, a set of controls and policies and methodologies, it took the analysis of the SOC report really to another level. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the time savings. So again, I mentioned, the reports are usually 70 pages long. You usually need someone who's very familiar with processes and controls, both business controls and IT controls, to be able to perform an analysis, and then to do mapping, to understand what the risk is, and something that would take my team a good part of a better part of a week, because you start and stop as you're going through the analysis, or you're checking with different areas. Now someone sitting down and working through a model could really bring that down to an hour and a half. So just in terms of reviewing the report, highlighting SOX compliance or potential operational issues, the time it took to do a review went down significantly. The mapping is very important for auditors. If you've ever done this yourself, or you've heard external auditors or internal auditors ask you, okay, well, your service organization is asking you for these user control considerations. These have to be in place in order for the entire environment to be adequate. How do you do that? So again, someone would need to be familiar with all the controls at the organization. Some organizations have 150, 200, 300 key controls, and on top of that, they might have another 300 non-key controls. And an individual would have to go through and those 50 or 60 considerations that the report says should be in place for different reasons at the company, and they'd have to map the control, and then also justify why that control makes sense for that user control consideration. So very time extensive exercise. And again, AI was able to do this rather quickly and with minimal errors. I do want to stress that it's very, very important that someone who understands, the risks and controls be involved in these analyses and review, because you still need a human and a professional to validate the information it's proposing. But again, it did a very good job of mapping for the examples I had provided. The last item that I wanted to consider, and I think sometimes it's forgotten, but in many cases could be the most important one, right? A lot of times I've seen organizations say, okay, well, we just do these SOC reports, reviews for SOX compliance purposes. But there is a lot of operational information in these reports. So while you might have a clean report from a SOX compliance standpoint, that it isn't really elevating your SOX compliance risk, there could be some operational things going on that are in the report that you should be aware of if you're an application owner, and or the administrator for for the organization of one of your service providers and their application. So when I went through the same example and said, okay, well, now I understand we're pretty comfortable with SOX compliance, but what about operational risk? Can you please highlight those? And it gave a very, very good summary of the operational risks and considerations that management should be, making in reviewing that SOC report. A lot of times there's references to subservice organizations and work that was done or wasn't done. So we might think, oh, we got a SOC report and it was, clean, but not realizing that in that report it states, well, for a subservice organization, we may have not done any evaluation or any work. So, you might need to go to the subservice organization and obtain a SOC report from them or perform independent procedures to get comfort. So again, from the three aspects, whether it's just highlighting SOX compliance risk, highlighting or help assisting with mapping of controls and to your to your controls and to your policies, or helping you better understand operational risk. It uh, it did a very good job in assisting in these areas. So again, the amount of time to be able to have a starting point in the analysis and have you know uh, critical conversations normally with external auditors and internal auditors on the risk profile of an application, particularly for SOX compliance, but then also for operational risk. It really reduced the time from something that would take better part of a week to you can now respond to questions. And usually with a better understanding of why the auditor might be asking a specific question within just a few hours. So again, like in an earlier slide, here are some examples of applications that in areas where you would usually obtain a SOC 1. Now, many organizations, as I mentioned earlier, might only have a formal process for reviewing the SOC reports if they're SOX compliance applications. But I would encourage you all, or just regardless of whether it's a SOX compliant application, if you have a provider providing a service or an application, it's important to get that SOC report as you're going through the process of choosing an organization to help you, but also as you maintain and evaluate the service. Hopefully on a 6-month basis if the SOC reports are available, but at least on an annual basis for anyone that makes the report available. It's important to review it and understand what the risks are to your organization. And then, as I mentioned earlier, and I encourage maybe not only for SOC reports, but I have found that people that are using AI to better understand where auditors are coming from a risk perspective tend to provide answers that are sort of audit speak or might make more sense to auditors. So a lot of times you might get a question from an auditor and you're not sure why they're asking the way they're asking. So I encourage people to use AI to say, hey, from I'm going through this type of audit. This is what the auditor is looking for or asking. This is my role. This is what I do. How what might they truly be asking, and it saves you some time and potentially fees of going the back and forth with your auditor to truly understand what they're asking for, and maybe upfront provide a faster response where with the assistance of AI, it's helped you introduce or help you interpret and understand the risk that the auditors are talking about. And then at the bigger picture, as you start looking at multiple reports and your model starts understanding your overall control environment and your risk profile, it starts giving you better information for those conversations with auditors, or just maybe changes you might want to make within your organization, just in terms of the risk that the organization is willing to accept. So obviously, or maybe not obvious, but it's important to note that when you start anything like this, you have to make sure you have all the right approvals and you're working in the correct environment. So it has to be a secure environment. you have to be aware of whether what the limitations are for the SOC reports you're using. Uh, in my experience, most providers are don't want you sometimes even sharing the SOC reports with the external auditors. So, if you have to check with legal in terms of what you can and can't do, and make sure you're following all your internal policies, and you're working with a secure environment before you start dropping SOC reports for assistance with analysis from an AI tool. I would suggest you start with your most critical applications in a SOX environment. This is going to be with your ERP. From there, you can, or maybe if you're not a SOX compliant, or if you're not a public company, maybe it's the most critical applications to the organization, just depending on your business model. But that's always a good starting point to start with the review of those SOC reports. And then from there, start looking at the different systems that help support the main, the main ERP. And then, over time, you'll find that your model will start tying in and understanding the integrations within the system. So, at face value, when you're looking at one report, and there might be one issue in it, it's not a big risk. But when you start looking at it, maybe that was a risk related to an integration with maybe a more critical application, it could potentially be a higher risk. So again, your AI model could help you highlight those areas and understand the interdependencies between different systems. Again, AI, and I'm sure you're aware of this, is really great at cross-referencing and looking at a report and saying this is exactly where I came across this, and this relates to this specific risk within your organization. That's a very consistent review, and it does it quickly. But again, when it comes to risk and understanding the intricacies of how your applications are deployed, how they're configured, how they integrate with your other tools and applications. That's really where you need the human to truly understand if what AI might be suggesting as a risk is a true risk. So you need that that knowledge from the human to truly make the final determination and assessment as to where the final risks with a vendor and their service lies. All right, so for SOX application owners, here's some key takeaways. So again, start with your most critical applications, but I would encourage you, as you have a tool review these SOC reports for SOX purposes, also have them review it for operational purposes. Make sure you're looking at the interdependencies between different systems. I find that every year there are more and more solutions and providers and applications being integrated into the ERPs. Some, applications are really good at billing, others are really good at revenue recognition, others are really good at other things. So you might have your main ERP, but find that you use applications for different processes that are critical. So you can use AI to help you really understand the risk across your entire environment. But it's an opportunity to help you really transform the program from one where you're reacting, you're reviewing something once a year just for SOX compliance purposes, and really managing risk, on a more continuous basis, and instead of being reactive, being strategic, and maybe basing some decisions on your providers and the tools and applications you use, again, based on the updated understanding of risk and the risk profile that your company is willing to accept. That really is the end of my presentation. I'll open it up to questions anyone may have.
There is a question in the Q&A. It says, which AI tool did you use for SOC report analysis?
I've experimented with a few. The one that I found that worked best for sort of what I was trying to conclude was Claude Anthropic.
Any other questions? It doesn't look like there's any other questions.